Hello. Has anyone ever said to you that men watch women from a distance, especially if they are interested in them? I believe that's a true statement. Although we may not be able to see that they're watching from a distance, the wisdom that's on the inside of them tells them to watch from a distance. Wait and be patient and see what will happen. I believe that's what Boaz did in chapter 3. When he went to his foreman in chapter 2 and asked him, "Who is this woman that's working in my field that's not ever been here before, never seen her before? Who is she?" And the foreman goes on to tell him that it's Ruth, the Moabitess, who came back to Bethlehem with Naomi. And so he begins to watch her because now she's an employee of his. He begins to give her safety measures. He begins to show her and tell her who the best women are to hang out with and, to go where they go, do what they do. When they take a break, you take a break, all of these kinds of human resources things. Amen. And they're in this friendship, employer-employee zone, this friendship zone with one another, which is blossoming into so much more. But there's something that would have been happening concerning Boaz before he made a move toward Ruth. And he was watching from a distance, as most men do when they're interested in a woman. Most men, if you want to think about grade school, when little boys like little girls and they don't want to, they'd rather sock them in the arm, to make it seem like they hate them when actually they really like them, but they're just watching from a distance. And I believe that is inherent in men to do that over a period of time. And so I believe that's what Boaz did. I believe he was watching Ruth from a distance before he addressed his foreman to ask, "Who is this woman?" He had gotten some news about who she was. The community was talking about her, or he might have been possibly overhearing some conversations that other people were having concerning Ruth and being the new woman in the community. Watching from a distance. I want to talk about that today because I think as women, it is needful for us to understand that if a man is interested in us and he's watching us from a distance, he's watching for a very specific reason and purpose in mind. Amen. So let's talk about that. In many cultures and societies, it is common to notice that men may observe a potential wife from a distance before initiating a more intimate relationship. This behavior can be influenced by a combination of psychological, social, and cultural factors. Understanding these reasons can provide valuable insights in human relationships and courtship dynamics. Excuse me. Now, sometimes courtship dynamics are what can cause a situationship. We want to stay out of the situationship and float in the relationship. Amen. Some psychological factors to consider about why men observe women from a distance who they are interested in is that they're assessing compatibility. So we talked about that in the friendship first video. We didn't talk about compatibility, but we did talk about being honorable one to another. Assessing compatibility. Men may observe a woman from afar to gather information about her interests, her values, and her behavior. Now, let me say this about that. To the men, just because you observe one behavior or certain behaviors does not mean you have the full picture. I'll put it to you like this. Just because you may observe a woman that you're interested in at lunch ordering a salmon, like the fish, salmon, salmon salad for lunch on Monday and Tuesday does not mean that she wants that salmon salad for the rest of the week. So you may pick up on some things periodically, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is what she wants every day, which means if you're watching from a distance, you're going to have to be very patient, and more than watching from a distance, watch her over seasons of time. Not just distance, but seasons of time, which means you're going to have to be very patient. This observation period allows them to consider whether she aligns with their own expectations and life goals before making a move. We talked about that in the Friendship First. Another psychological factor why men watch women from a distance when they're interested in them is fear of rejection. Nobody likes to be rejected, and men have that same fear of rejection that maybe some women have as well. Approaching someone directly can be intimidating, especially when it comes to romantic intentions. By observing first, men can look for signs of receptiveness or mutual interest, reducing the risk of rejection. Again, that may not work in all circumstances, but it is a good thing, a good way to gauge and measure a situation. Another reason is building confidence. Taking the time to observe allows men to plan their approach, gather courage, and feel more confident when they finally initiate contact. So it may be a time for you as men to build confidence in approaching this woman that you're interested in rather than storming the gates, right? So taking time and building confidence and being prayerful as well. I believe Boaz was a man of prayer and wisdom. I don't believe he was just a willy-nilly jump to it kind of guy. The scriptures don't support that. And so I would say to the men who are watching this video, learn how to be patient and selective also, right? Don't take one thing you've learned from other situationships you've been in and try to apply that to a relationship that you're interested in, because you will be misreading the room. Okay, so when we talk about social and cultural influences, these may be opportunities for men to understand why. We just talked about why men stand at a distance concerning women that they're interested in. And in some cases, it is cultural to do that. In various cultures, there are unspoken rules about courtship and relationships. Unspoken rules. How many times have we misread the room because of unspoken rules, unspoken thoughts? You saw something, you misinterpreted, you misread it. And so there are unspoken rules about courtships and relationships too. And also, there are unwritten rules about it, because you may get some information from one of your friends about what they think about courtship and relationships. It could be completely off from what you need to understand. So this is one of them. Observing from a distance is sometimes seen as respectful, giving both parties space and time to evaluate each other without pressure. Because building relationships can be a pressure cooker. And so you want to relieve as much pressure as you can from yourself and the other person, right? Because you don't want to put anybody in a bind or make them feel uncomfortable or, that type of thing. And so it gives each of you time to evaluate the other without any pressure. Again, that would be also in that friendship zone, okay? Protecting reputation. And this is what Boaz did for Ruth in chapter 3. He protected her reputation. It was dark outside. He didn't want her, he protected her from various things, but it was dark outside. And so he didn't want her walking around in the evening of the night, just like Boaz woke up at midnight. Who's to say how many other men in the camp were awake at midnight as well? And had Ruth been released to go back to Naomi's house, she could very well have fallen into some trouble with some rabble rousers that would have hurt her or abused her. And Boaz, knowing the men that he works with, wanted her to stay in a safe place. That's a friend. Amen. And so protecting one's reputation is another reason why watching from a distance is necessary, especially in communities with strong social ties. Careful observations help prevent misunderstandings or gossip that might arise from premature or overt romantic advances. Boaz hit the nail on the head when he allowed Ruth to go back to Naomi's house just before daybreak, before you could recognize anybody coming or going, right? Just before daybreak. And then he sent her back to Naomi's house, and he sent her back with what one would consider a small dowry, right? He was willing to give her something. Now, she didn't do anything, but he was willing to give her something to take back to her home. Another reason is gathering social information. Men may also watch how a potential partner interacts with others. This is where I'm telling you, it's all back in that friendship first video. How partners interact with each other. Well, how are you with each other? How are you going to know that unless you spend time with each other? With family, friends, and colleagues. Let your family, friends, and colleagues meet the person that you're interested in. Don't hide them away like you're ashamed of them. Let them meet them so they can gauge your interaction with each other. Sometimes our friends, families, and colleagues can see things that we can't see because we're Twitter-pated, like on Bambi. We're Twitter-pated. It's just that season and it's that time. And, the pheromones and hormones are raging or whatever. And I can't really see clearly, but my friends, family, and colleagues are not as invested in the relationship. And so they can see a lot more clearly than maybe you or your intended can. So men also watch how a potential partner interacts with others, family, friends, and colleagues to understand their social standing, their values, and how they treat different people in different situations. And that goes both ways. The woman also should be watching those things. How does he treat his parents? How does he treat his mother? How does he treat his family and friends? How do they respond when they're upset? How do they show disappointment? Because you're going to show disappointment one way or another. It's going to come out. Amen. You can stuff it down as long as you want. Eventually, it's going to come out. So how do they handle when they're disappointed? How do they handle situations when they feel like they've been mistreated? Do they seek retaliation and revenge? How do they take it to prayer? Do they discuss it calmly with the other person and work out a solution that benefits everybody? Or is it something totally different and something that you would want to stay away from? Amen. The act of observing a potential life partner from a distance before initiating intimacy, we talked about that in the friendship first, is a multifaceted behavior influenced by personal insecurities, social norms, and evolutionary instincts. By taking this approach, this cautious approach, men may feel better equipped to make informed decisions and foster more meaningful, lasting relationships, which is what most men want. Most men do not want relationships that come and that go. Now, if they are most wise, emotionally intelligent men, want relationships that last. And we as wise women, we want relationships that last as well. And so looking at and understanding why he may be observing from a distance, you may not even know it. You might know it, but there's a reason for it. And so practical application of these things will help both of you out, because again, eventually you will find out that either we're moving forward together or we are moving apart. Amen. And you are for someone else, and I am for someone else. So let's look at Ruth in chapter 4. Boaz has made up his mind. He already said in chapter 3, I'm going to handle this. I will take care of this. If the kinsman redeemer that's in front of me decides he doesn't want to, that's fine. I will marry you, is what Boaz said to Ruth in the 3rd chapter. And so now let's talk a little bit about how this whole process, this divine interaction, this divinely providential situation has come about in Ruth chapter 4. And don't put limits on God to think that he's not able to provide you with a divinely ordained relationship, because he is well able. Amen. So in chapter 4, verse 1. So Boaz went to the town gate and took a seat there. Because remember in chapter 3, he said he's going to talk to this kinsman redeemer who's next in line. He's going to talk to him, have a conversation with him, and they're going to work this thing out. They're going to make it clear that either this guy wants to redeem Naomi and Ruth and all the land that belonged to her husband, Naomi's husband and her 2 sons, or he is not. And so he says he took a seat there at the town gate where decisions are made. When the family redeemer the family redeemer he had mentioned came by, Boaz called out to him, "Come over here, friend. I want to talk to you." So they sat down together. Then Boaz called 10 leaders. I'm telling you, Boaz is a wise man. Not only is he talking to the kinsman redeemer, they're sitting in the city gate where judgments are made, where contracts are made, so to speak, where agreements are made, where decisions are made. And he calls for the 10 leaders from the town and asks them to sit as witnesses. Sit as witnesses. And Boaz said to the family redeemer, he said, you know Naomi, who came back from Moab? She is selling the land. Listen to how he leads. She is selling the land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So now he's trying to make a business proposition, right? He says, I felt that I should speak to you about it so that you can redeem it if you wish. You can increase your land portfolio if you wish to. If you want the land, then buy it here in the presence of these witnesses. But if you don't want it, let me know right away, because I am next in line to redeem it after you. The man replied, all right, I'll redeem it. Then Boaz told him the second part of the contract. Of course, your purchase of the land from Naomi also requires that you marry Ruth, the Moabite widow. That way, she can have children who will carry on her husband's name and keep the land in the family. I apologize for my throat. I apologize for it going in and out. Then that way, she can have children who will carry on her husband's name and keep the land in the family. And the man said, I cannot redeem it because this might endanger my own estate. You redeem the land. I cannot do it. In those days, this was how they sealed a contract. They would take off the sandal, transferring the right of purchase, to remove the sandal and hand it to the other party. Now, I believe the significance of that is that the sandal represents ownership. And so whoever has the ownership of the sandal actually owns the land. So this publicly validated the transaction. So the other family redeemer drew off his sandal as he said to Boaz, you buy the land. So the contract has been made. It's literally been signed, sealed, and delivered by the transfer of a shoe. And that shoe represents who has the right and the ability and responsibility of the land that shoe belongs to. Amen. And so Boaz, like he said, you don't have to do anything else. I will handle it from here. Now, the end of the story is this. We know that Boaz and Ruth got married because of divine providence. God has had his hand in this situation from the time that Naomi left Bethlehem, Judah with her husband and came back empty. God has had his hand in this whole situation between Ruth, what just happened to be working in Boaz's field. No, that was divine providence. Boaz just happened to see Ruth. No, that was divine providence. This kinsman redeemer just happened to say no, that he didn't want to redeem the land because he didn't want to marry Ruth. That was divine providence. All that the will of God may be made manifest in Ruth's life. Amen. And in Naomi's life. God is an awesome kinsman redeemer. He is the one who will take matters into his hands, and he will fix things and work things out as they should be. And he did that for Ruth and for Boaz. What do we learn from chapter 4? We learned that sometimes there are situations, as it was with Boaz and the other kinsman redeemer, that sometimes there's things that have to be worked out before you can move forward. Sometimes there are things that are out of your control, that absolutely are out of your hand, that have to be put in somebody else's hand in order for you to move forward, in order for you to gain in life, in order for you to have the outcome that God intended for you to have. Sometimes you have to wait. You have to be patient for other things to work out before you can move forward. Now, what I want to say is that this is Ruth chapter 4. Amen. And we talked about how in Ruth chapter 4, he's watching you from a distance. But we also found out that Boaz made a move. Amen. As the kinsman redeemer. That he got the whole, if he was on Let's Make a Deal, he would have won all 3 doors. Amen. If he was on The Price is Right, he would have won both bonus rounds. Amen. And so just to have that understanding of how this relationship developed, how it started. Yes, this was God's providence and God's design. But I believe, again, that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. If he did it for Ruth and Boaz for the intended purpose that he had in mind for them, he can do it for you, and he can do it for me. I would say he has done it for me. One day I'll give you my testimony. Amen. Our next video is going to be, is Boaz really for you? And that is going to be a video that will cap off this whole series. And it is going to be specifically for men, even though I will be talking to women. You don't want to miss it. Is Boaz really for you? That's the next video coming up. God bless.